Hey guys, Argent here. Now, this is a film I really had no expectations from. For those of you who haven't seen this movie, you probably know about the Minions and only the Minions. I'll tell you now, the Minions are by far the worst part of Despicable Me and Despicable Me 2. I actually really like Despicable Me. Despicable Me 2 was pretty bad, but I'll probably do a reaction review of it because it's kind of edgy. Why is it edgy? Because it says that children should have a mother and a father, and in our age, saying that kids deserve a mother and father is considered edgy for some reason, which is in itself pretty kind of disturbing. Um, the fact that that's like a controversial statement when it's been kind of the norm for all of history. But this isn't really about that. This is about Despicable Me 1, which is a film I had no expectations of. I thought it looked like a really lame, dumb film. I'm trying to think of why I even decided to go see it. I think just because I just like this. I just like movies, as it should be pretty obvious. I like to go see movies. I think they're a lot of fun. I I like to see movies. I think they're a lot of fun. What was I gonna say again? Um, and sometimes I'll just go see a film. So like, I'll go give it a shot. How bad can it be? Maybe it got a pretty good review. Maybe I'm just like, I got to keep up with it. You got to try new things sometimes. Like maybe it's a little outside my comfort zone or something I just wouldn't normally watch, but that's no reason not to give it a try, not to try to watch it. Um, so that's kind of why I go see movies like Despicable Me sometimes. I'm like, I know it's a kids movie, but it looks pretty big. It's got some big names in it. Let's just give it a shot. There's nothing else playing at the moment. I mean, so I just like to watch movies. Like it could be anything. I just like the experience of going to the theater, getting your popcorn. You sit down and you just kind of get away from everything for an hour or two, and you get immersed in a story. Um, so that's yeah. So Despicable Me. Let's just get into it. The Minions suck. The movie Minions is a piece of shit. I tried watching it. I got 5 minutes in and like this is crappy. The best thing that's come out of the Minions is nihilistic memes, which is basically a Facebook page where they have minions saying all kinds of like Nietzschean and really depressing shit. It's kind of like No Lives Matter meets the movie Minions, which is pretty much literally what it was. So, anyways, Despicable Me. So Gru is kind of like an old school supervillain. He's played by Steve Carell, who has kind of an ambiguous Eastern European accent. Gru is kind of an old school kind of James Bond era villain. All of his kind of gadgets and stuff are like from the 1970s, maybe the 1960s. He wears kind of the clothing. He's kind of inspired by Blofeld, and just kind of like spy movie villains from that period. So he's kind of like old school. To some extent, he's kind of like the conservative traditional villain, and he's kind of being upstaged throughout the course of the movie. And his villain is kind of like a new age hipster douchebag supervillain, or at least kind of like a '90s kid supervillain. So I immediately like that. I kind of like the old kind of traditional, almost kind of aristocratic supervillain versus kind of like the young punk. That's already kind of this movie has a very conservative vibe, ironically enough, despite being about a supervillain. So it starts out with Vector, who's kind of like the technological, super advanced supervillain. And by the way, this movie's a bit like The Incredibles, which I'll also have to do a reactionary review on at some point. Just in terms of like you have like kind of the new age guy versus kind of like the old school guys. So Vector steals the Pyramid of Giza, which is an action described by Gru's sidekick, Dr. Nefario, as making all other villains look lame. So Gru decides to regain his position as the leader of the coolest villain in the world by shrinking and stealing the moon, which is based on his childhood dream of being an astronaut, which was always mocked by his mother. The plan is extremely expensive, um, so he attempts to try to seek a loan from the Bank of Evil. Now, what's funny is Gru faces all kind of like these mundane budgeting problems. He doesn't live in a particularly large house. He has to pay all the minions, and so he's constantly short on cash and short on resources to do anything. Super villainly, particularly after he goes straight, just doesn't pay that well anymore. So the bank president, though, likes his plan and will give him the money if he can get the shrink ray first. So Gru and his minions succeed in stealing the Shrink Ray from a secret base in East Asia. But the up-and-coming supervillain Vector, who was the guy who staged the pyramid theft, immediately steals it from Gru as revenge for freezing his head earlier on. Gru attempts to break into the fortress to get the Shrink Ray back, but is completely incapable of it because Vector has all these advanced traps. So Gru comes up with a plan to adopt 3 orphan girls, um, as they are able to easily walk into his opponent's secret base selling cookies. So Gru disguises himself as an evil dentist and adopts the girls from Miss Hattie's Home from Girls. His plan, of course, using them to infiltrate Vector's base so he can get the Shrink Ray back. However, Gru has trouble convincing them to do this as they start to basically take advantage of him. Well, not take advantage of him, but they immediately kind of see him as a father figure and start being like, okay, we'll do this, but you gotta like take us to ballet classes, you gotta take us to movies, you gotta tell us bedtime stories, etc. And Gru basically has to start becoming a parent if he's going to convince them to do his dirty work for him. And Gru's kind of like a middle-aged man who's never had children, never had a wife, and has just kind of lived alone with his minions, trying to carry out evil plans. And the girls kind of awaken a paternal instinct in him. Over time, he begins to feel affection for them and begins to feel um, kind of an attachment to the girls. There's like a scene where they go to a theme park, they go to ballet classes, etc. And he eventually starts to become proud of his accomplishments. And once again, this is a fairly conservative message. Basically, it's saying that for a lot of people, fulfillment comes from having a family, for having children. Even if you're like this supervillain who can steal shrink rays, flies around in like a hovercraft, and can even steal the moon, your life isn't worth anything unless you have children and you make a real contribution to society. And Gru actually only becomes happy as a character once he has his children and he adopts them at the end of the movie. So it's very touching actually. It's a very kind of heartwarming kind of family values movie that's kind of completely lacking in degeneracy. I actually really enjoyed this film. I was not expecting to enjoy it at all. I mean, it's family values, but it's not really preachy or over the top. It's just kind of like what movies should be. Kind of has a funny plot, kind of a bit of a interesting plot, kind of a bit of a parody of supervillains, but also with like some genuinely good writing and kind of memorable characters. Gru is a good kind of anti-hero. So eventually he succeeds in tricking the girls, or getting the girls to come with him to Vector's fortress, and Gru succeeds in stealing the shrink ray. Okay, so yeah, so this is when the girls suggest a day at the theme park, and Gru agrees, believing that he can just go and abandon the girls there. Let's see here. So he's going to go to the theme park, he's going to leave the girls there and just run off. He's told by an attendant, though, that he has to accompany the girls, and he's dragged through the theme park for the day. Eventually, finally, they warm his heart after they compliment him on blowing up a rigged game to get one of the girls a unicorn, which is kind of one of the cute moments in the movie, because he wins this giant unicorn for the smallest girl, and she's like, "It's so fluffy!" And he kind of starts to feel protectiveness, and he gets pissed off when the kids have their money cheated out of them by the rigged carnival game. So later, Gru contacts the head of the Bank of Evil, saying that he finally has the shrink ray in his possession. His meeting is interrupted, though, as the 3 girls interrupt the meeting, and Mr. Perkins is like, "Well, if you have kids now, you can't be a member of the Guild of Evil. We don't have confidence in you. We think you've become weak." And he has said, "Well, we're no longer going to fund your operation." So Gru's funding is cut off, and the Bank of Evil won't continue to fund his payroll, so he can no longer pay the minions for their services. The girls offer the contents of their piggy bank, and the minions hand over their own savings too. So Gru, inspired, sacrifices parts of his lair to construct a spacecraft. It's kind of this heartwarming thing where everybody kind of gets together and pitches in for kind of their common good, because this is something they want to accomplish. The creators of the movie said that they wanted to steal the moon so they could have Gru do something villainous, but not really like openly evil. Like he doesn't like kill people. He doesn't kind of go out and like just destroy people. He doesn't really do anything that malicious. The moon's kind of like an abstract, fun thing to have in a movie. I know it's going to destroy the tides, but this is a comedy, so that doesn't really matter. Um, so they succeed in building the spaceship. Gru successfully shrinks and steals the moon, but is too late to attend his girl's ballet recital. Finding instead, he shows up and finds a note from Vector, who has kidnapped the girls, and will exchange them for the shrunken moon. He arrives at the headquarters, and Gru makes the trade. Um, because he's come to realize that the girls matter more to him than his plan to steal the moon. Besides, he's stolen the moon. He's kind of accomplished the ultimate thing in his career as a villain, and he's ready to retire. He's accomplished everything. He's proved everything he has to prove. He's ready to kind of go back to regular life, settle down. The hole in his life has been filled by the girls, and he has nothing really to prove to anyone else. He pulled off the biggest caper in villain history. He stole the moon. So, Vector reneges on the deal and steals the girls as well as the moon, much to Gru's anger. We have a pretty good action scene at this point. Dr. Nefario discovers that the effects of the shrink ray are temporary, and that the bigger the object was originally, the faster it will regain its size. Since the moon is pretty much the biggest thing they could conceivably sink without blowing the world up, the moon starts to expand again in Vector's ship. Gru, Dr. Nefario, and the minions pull off a big action scene and a mid-air rescue of the girls just as the moon explodes out of Vector's ship and launches itself back into orbit with Vector trapped on it. Sometime later, Gru has succeeded in formally adopting the girls and treats them as his daughters, writing them a bedtime storybook framed around his own experience. I think it's like the nasty old man and the three young kittens or something. And it's kind of cute because he has the really long villain nose, and he pokes it through a hole in the book as like a part of the thing. And the film ends with the girls performing their ballet recital for Gru, his mother, Dr. Nefario, and the minions. So if you're looking for kind of, I would highly recommend this film if you have kids, particularly young kids. It's just kind of good family-friendly entertainment. The movie's fairly funny. It's fairly heartwarming. There's really nothing morally abhorrent about it. Sure, Gru's a villain, but he doesn't really want to hurt people. He just kind of wants to go out and prove something. They put the moon back, and it's not shown that they actually kill anybody. It's just kind of a fun, heartwarming movie that's unexpectedly kind of conservative in its message. It is kind of, for some reason, a family values film. So overall, I think Despicable Me is a good movie. Is it the best movie I've ever seen? Not really. It's not like amazing. It is a good, solid film though, and I would definitely give it a watch if you have any interest in that style of film. So, this is Argent. I hope you enjoyed the review, and I'm going to be signing out for now.